The wind at the edge of the prairie has its own kind of voice, soft and wild all at once, like the whisper of something you thought you forgot. And there she sat, on a splintered crate, hands folded neat in her lap, the hem of her traveling dress just brushing the dusty floorboards of the station platform. The laces of her boots were still tied tight, the way she'd knotted them that morning back east. Before the train took her past everything she'd ever known, she was alone, but not invisible. People noticed her, a figure dressed too finely for this cracked wood town. Not wealthy, no, just careful. Pressed linen blouse, long skirts stitched with patience. A girl from far off, carrying the weight of waiting like a second spine. The crate beneath her bore the faint stamp of a Boston shipping yard, nearly rubbed off from travel. One suitcase beside her, upright, holding a shawl, a letter, and a hope that hadn't yet given up. She sat straight, chin high, eyes on the tracks. But her heartbeat, if one had leaned close enough to listen, was quiet as a moth's wing. The train whistled through once, screeching like a promise about to be broken, but no one stepped off for her. Not that time, not the time after, not the time after that, either. The station master had tried, gently, to make conversation. "You sure your fella's not comin' tomorrow?" he'd asked, voice wrapped in caution like an old quilt. She had looked at him kindly, not angry, not proud. "I'll wait one more train," she'd said. Then she resumed her silence, as though words cost more than she could afford that day. She had come on account of a letter, folded once, then again, edges creased and soft now from all the rereading. A man out west, needing a bride, a practical sort of arrangement. Land was wide, life was hard, and hearts, if not already claimed, were offered like the last seat by the fire, not always warm, but always needed. The letter said things like, "There is space here, and I'm looking to fill it. I am not a poet, but I am honest. You'll have a roof, and quiet. I don't ask for much, just kindness and strength." She had replied with careful penmanship and plain truth. She had nothing left in Boston but the memory of a mother buried too young and a boarding house full of stairs. So she packed her good gloves, her comb, her mother's brooch, and her name, which she no longer spoke aloud to herself. She carried it like one carries a hymn, not always on the tongue, but never quite forgotten. Days passed. She became part of the scenery, like the post where birds nested, or the crate itself. Her waiting made her invisible, but only in the way a shadow is. The townsfolk whispered, "She's the one, mail-order bride, left behind. Shame." The preacher's wife brought her a tin of rolls once, but the girl refused it, politely. "I'll be all right, ma'am. Just waiting." That word again, waiting, as though it were a thing that could hold her upright when the world swayed beneath her. One day, the woman at the seamstress's shop across the road waved her in from the wind. "You got stitching hands," she said, pressing a bolt of cotton into the girl's arms. "Sit, try." She didn't say no. She sat at the little corner table and let her fingers remember how to mend. Her stitches were neat, almost too neat, the kind of control a person practices when they can't fix their own unraveling heart. She mended until her hands ached. She mended until she didn't hear the whisper of the station clock anymore. But come sunset, she returned to her crate, as though it were a sacred promise she had to keep. One evening, the air turned gold, the kind of light that makes old things shimmer new again. She took the letter out once more. Her fingers traced the words, not reading them, but remembering the feeling they once carried. She imagined the man who wrote them, tall perhaps, or maybe not, broad-shouldered, likely, hands like leather, voice like dust on gravel. She'd never even seen his face, just the signature at the bottom. But she remembered the way it felt when she opened that envelope the first time, as if someone had lit a lantern in a long-abandoned room inside her. It was the hope of it. That's what she'd come for. Not safety, not status. Just the hope that someone, somewhere, had made space in their world for her shape. The letter stopped coming, eventually. No reply to her final confirmation. No instructions. No sign. The train had come. She had come. But he, whoever he was, had not. The station master grew more nervous with each passing day. "Miss," he finally said one morning, clearing his throat, hat in hand. "There's no shame in going back. Folks would understand." She looked up at him, and there was no bitterness in her gaze. "I didn't come here to be understood," she said, voice soft as worn cotton. "I came here to be chosen." That night, the sky opened wide above the plains, stars like tiny pinpricks in the black velvet of silence. She didn't light a lantern. She just sat there, her hands around her knees, her face turned to the tracks, still and straight as a promise no one kept. If someone had watched her then, truly seen her, they might have realized something rare, that she was not waiting for a man anymore. She was waiting for the moment her heart would stop hoping, and, though the wind tugged at her skirt and the night coyotes sang somewhere past the hills, she didn't move. The next train wouldn't come until morning, but something else, something quieter, steadier, and far more important, was already riding her way, not in steam or thunder, not in promises or letters, but in hoofbeats, slow and sure, with a saddle worn by time and a heart unafraid of silence. Somewhere beyond the edge of town, where the prairie stretched wide as a held breath, a man rode alone. He wasn't the type to arrive with a flourish. He came quiet like rain that starts slow, unnoticed, and leaves everything softer in its wake. Most folks didn't know much about him. He spoke little, ate alone, worked hard and paid fair, rode a blue roan with a white blaze on its nose, and always tipped his hat when passing women or elders. But he saw things. He saw the girl on the crate. Saw her before anyone else gave her more than a glance. The first time, it was just a flicker, a silhouette against the morning sun, a ribbon of hair catching in the breeze, a pair of gloves held gently in her lap. She wasn't looking at anyone, just the tracks, always the tracks. He kept riding, but he looked back. His name didn't matter. Here, what mattered was that he'd been burned before, not in body, but in trust. Loved once, or something close to it. The woman had worn perfume like a weapon, and smiles like bait. She'd left with a man richer and meaner than him. Left behind the smell of oranges, a chipped teacup, and a dog that didn't understand why no one called it inside anymore. After that, he stopped looking, stopped hoping, started living like the land open, quiet, lonely, but never complaining. He wasn't looking for a woman. He was just passing through the station on a routine supply run when he noticed the girl again, sitting exactly where she had before. The suitcase never moved. Her posture never slouched. Not sad, not bitter, just still. Stillness, he had learned, could mean strength. The land was still before it bloomed. The deer was still before it bolted. Stillness wasn't absence. It was presence. And her stillness was loud. He asked a blacksmith one afternoon while waiting on a new horseshoe, "Who's the girl at the depot?" The blacksmith squinted toward the horizon, spat into the dust. "Mail order bride," he said. Fella changed his mind, left her waiting. Poor thing. The cowboy didn't say anything, just nodded, as if tucking the information into some quiet drawer inside him. He didn't feel pity. He felt something deeper, something that moved through his ribs like a winter wind that wanted in. 2 days later, he passed again. This time, she was standing, straight-backed, holding the letter in both hands like a fragile thing that might turn to ash if breathed on too hard. Their eyes met, only for a moment, just enough. He nodded. She didn't nod back, but she saw him, and that was enough. The days moved on, slow and golden. He'd passed through town on errands. Always saw her. Never spoke. Not yet. He was learning the edges of her, How she folded her hands when the wind picked up. How she scanned every train window for a face she never found. How she never cried, not even once. Grief sat on her like a shawl worn, but chosen. He respected that. One dry afternoon, as he returned from a cattle run, he spotted her walking back from the seamstress's shop with her sleeves rolled, a thread basket in one hand. A dog barked suddenly, a loud, sharp crack, and startled her. She stumbled, twisting her ankle slightly on a crooked stone. He was off his horse before. His boots hit the ground. "Ma'am." His voice was soft, not unsure, just respectful. She blinked, bracing herself, expecting pity. But his eyes didn't hold that. Just steady kindness. The kind that doesn't look away. "I'm all right," she said, brushing off her skirt. "No," he said, "but I can walk you anyway." She hesitated, then nodded once. They walked side by side, not touching, not speaking. But silence between two people can say more than words ever dare. He didn't ask her about the man who never came. He asked if she liked stitching. She smiled a little. "It's something to do with my hands," she said. "Makes me feel useful." He said he liked fixing fences. For the same reason. That was all. But something passed between them. Something like recognition, not of faces, but of wounds. The next day, he left a tin cup of water beside her crate. No note, no explanation, just water, cold, clean. She drank it, slowly, then placed the cup on the edge of the platform with care, as if saying, "I saw what you did. I don't need thanks to feel grateful." Others started to notice. The preacher's wife watched them one morning, elbowed her husband. "Something's blooming," she whispered. "Don't meddle," he replied. "Some flowers bloom better, in secret." One evening, the sun dipped low and spilled gold all over town. He passed by again. She wasn't on the crate. His heart flickered. Then he saw her inside the seamstress's shop, holding up a nearly finished dress. She looked softer somehow, less like someone waiting, more like someone choosing. He didn't go in, just watched. And as she turned, their eyes met through the glass. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. That night, he lit a fire outside his cabin and sat with his horse grazing nearby. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out the letter, the one he'd meant to return weeks ago. It had been mist-covered, found it in his mailbox the morning after the girl arrived. He hadn't opened it, but he hadn't given it back either. Why? Maybe because it smelled faintly of lavender. Maybe because it had her name on it, and her name had started to mean something. Or maybe because some part of him knew the letter held an ending, and he wasn't sure she deserved one just yet. Still, it wasn't his to keep. It was time. The next morning, he found her at the station again. He dismounted, walked slow, no hat tipping, no dramatics. Just a man with a letter in hand, and a silence full of reverence. "This came for you," he said. Her fingers hovered before taking it. She looked at him. "Why now?" His eyes didn't flinch. "Because you were strong enough to read it." And with that, he left. Not because he didn't care, but because he knew sometimes the kindest thing a man can do is let a woman open her own door. That night, she sat by lantern light and read the words that had been meant to hurt her, but they didn't. Not anymore, because somewhere out there, a man had seen her, not as broken, but as brave. The station looked different in morning light, not because the boards were less weathered or the dust had settled, but because she wasn't waiting anymore. She was remembering. She walked slowly, boots leaving soft prints in the mud left behind by the storm. In her hands was the old letter, folded one last time. Tucked beside it, the brooch polished now, warm from her pocket. And there, just where she'd left it all those weeks ago, was the crate. Her crate. She sat again, but only for a moment. The wind was soft on her cheek. The air tasted new, though it came from the same prairie. That was the funny thing about change. Sometimes nothing around you moves, but something inside you turns like a page. The cowboy stood a few feet away, his hat low, one boot propped against the station post. He didn't speak. He knew this wasn't a goodbye. It was a funeral, a small one, a quiet one. She reached down and ran her fingers along the worn edge of the crate, the same place her hand had rested every day when she sat and waited for a man who never came. But now, it wasn't about him, it was about her, about everything she had carried to this place. Grief, hope, pride, shame, and all the stories that could have broken her, but didn't. I used to think if I sat long enough, someone would come, she said. He stepped closer. But maybe I was just waiting to come back to myself. He nodded. Sometimes words didn't need answers, only understanding. Behind her, townsfolk had gathered, not in crowds, but in respectful ones and twos. The seamstress, the preacher's wife, even the station master, hat clutched to his chest like a hymn book. They didn't speak either. They just watched as she stood, lifted the crate, not with struggle, but with grace, and placed it in the back of his wagon. One of the children clapped. No one hushed them, because sometimes joy deserves to break the silence. He helped her into the seat beside him. The wagon creaked. The horses waited calm. The road ahead was long, not paved with certainty, but wide with possibility. As they rolled forward, she looked once, just once, over her shoulder at the platform where she had learned patience, grief, and finally, her own worth. And she did not look back again. By sundown, they reached a ridge beyond town, beyond fences, beyond the edges where people stop pretending and start living. There, tucked between two low hills, was land untouched, grasses swaying in the wind. A lone tree bent slightly to the east, like it had bowed to time and kept on standing anyway. He pointed. Who's gonna build a house here? She looked out over the space. Still gonna, if you're willing to help me pick where the window should face. She smiled. A real one. The kind that doesn't ask permission. That night, under a prairie moon, they unpacked the wagon. The crate was last. She looked at it a long moment, then said, "We should burn it." He didn't ask why. He simply gathered kindling. They broke it apart together, plank by plank. The wood snapped easily, softer now from time and storm. When the fire took, it rose slow, then bright, yellow-orange, licking at the edges of everything she used to be. She didn't cry, but her breath caught. Once, when the last board fell in, not because it hurt, but because she was free. Later, sitting beside the flames, wrapped in a quilt and his silence, she whispered, "I don't know what we are yet." He looked at her, and the fire reflected in his eyes like something ancient and warm. "Don't need to," he said. "We're here. That's enough." And it was. Above them, the stars came out, brighter than any lantern, quiet as prayer. Somewhere, far off, a train called into the night. She didn't flinch. She didn't listen. She leaned her head on his shoulder and watched the fire burn down, not as an ending, but as a beginning. The sky cracked open on a Tuesday, not with violence, not at first, just a hush, the kind that makes birds go still and children look up from their play. By afternoon, clouds had gathered like thoughts too heavy to speak. She stood at the window of the seamstress's shop, watching the world fold inward. The horizon blurred, prairie grasses bowed. A rumble passed low through the bones of the town, and somewhere far off, thunder rolled like a wagon wheel over gravel. She didn't flinch. Rain was just water, and water, she knew, could either drown you or wash you clean. Inside, she gathered fabric from the shelves. The seamstress had gone home early, muttering about leaks in the roof. But the girl stayed. Of course, she stayed. There were dresses to protect, threads to tuck away. She had always been good at protecting things that couldn't ask for help. The door creaked open behind her. A gust of wind came with it, followed by boots, heavy, familiar. Careful on the wood. She didn't turn. You shouldn't be out in this, she said, fingers still pressing folded calico into boxes. I know, came the voice, warm and low, like the last logs on a fire. But I saw your light. She turned then. He stood just inside the door, hat dripping, coat dark with rain. He looked like he'd ridden through the whole storm just to make sure it hadn't taken her. Maybe he had. They worked in silence at first. He lifted wooden chairs onto tables, moved bolts of cloth out of puddles. She swept water from corners. Their hands moved without words, like two people who had shared a language long before they ever spoke. A lantern burned between them, casting soft gold on her face and shadow on his dot. At last, she asked, "Did you read the letter?" He paused. "No," he said. "Didn't seem right. Wasn't mine." She nodded. She respected that. But part of her wished he had, so he'd already know what was inside, and she wouldn't have to speak it aloud. "Still," she said, "he called me. ... Plain." She laughed, but the sound didn't rise. It stayed low, like a bruise. "He said he thought I'd be prettier, that I sounded younger in my letters. Said I'd look out of place in a photograph beside his horse." The cowboy didn't move. Didn't fill the silence with lies like he was wrong or you're beautiful. He simply said he didn't see right, and that was truer than anything else could have been. She sat down on a stool, suddenly tired. "You ever been left?" she asked. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, looking past her to the rain streaking down the window. "Once," he said. "Felt like someone blew out all the lanterns inside me." She looked up. "Did you wait for her?" He shook his head. "I waited for myself to come back." A long silence passed between them, the kind only two lonely people can share without breaking it. Then, softly, like a question she was afraid to know the answer to, she asked, "Why'd you give me the letter now?" He stepped forward. The lantern light touched the edge of his cheek, revealing something like worry, or hope, or both. "Because you ain't waiting anymore," he said. "You're choosing." She held that word in her chest. Choosing, it felt like fresh bread. Like the sound of boots outside your door when you didn't think anyone would come. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. A brooch, her mother's. She gasped, small and sharp, as if memory had just touched her shoulder. "I found it," he said. "Dropped outside the shop last week. Meant to give it sooner." Her fingers closed around it gently, reverently. "I thought I lost this," she whispered. "You didn't," he said. "Just forgot where it was for a while." She looked at him then, truly looked at the soft lines around his mouth, the rain still clinging to his collar, the patience in his eyes, no promises, no flowers, just presence. "I'm scared," she said. "Me too." "For what?" He shrugged. "That this ain't nothin', that it is. Either way, something's gonna change." She nodded. "I never wanted to be saved," she said, quietly. "I know," he replied. "And I ain't here to save you, just to sit in the rain beside you." She didn't cry that night, not like she thought she would. Instead, she felt something lift, not the pain, not the past, but the weight of carrying it alone. They stayed there, beside the flickering lantern, as the storm passed overhead, not touching, not rushing, just breathing the same air, sharing the same silence. To people who'd been chosen last, finally choosing each other, not with declarations, but with staying. By dawn, the rain had gone, left the town glistening, clean and quiet. She walked out onto the porch of the shop and breathed deep. The sky was wide again. He stood beside her, hat in hand. "I'll ride with you," he said, "wherever you're headed next." She looked at the street, the tracks, the open plain, and, for the first time in her life, she realized she wasn't waiting anymore. She was ready.